In this lesson, we will continue to study the concept of market sensing. Specifically, we'll be looking at the economic, technological, regulatory, and natural environmental aspects of the environmental analysis. Previously, we talked about how marketing focuses on facilitating an exchange between a customer and the organization's marketing mix so that we can create value and meet customer needs. Specifically, we've already talked about the competition aspect of environmental analysis, and today we'd like to move on and talk about the economic, regulatory, technological, and natural environment aspects of environmental analysis. Let's start by looking at a brief video about Cinnabon that explains a little bit about how Cinnabon has adjusted its marketing efforts in this new economy.
Probably was impacted more than others because of the recession. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how traffic sort of bounced back later?
Absolutely. So Cinnabon is a business where the franchise division is based in high traffic, captured traffic venues, airports, malls, travel plazas. When the recession hit, of course it affected everyone, but if you rely on traffic in an airport and no one's flying, and you rely on traffic in a mall and no one's shopping, there are no humans to buy your product. So our goal was to drive traffic in two ways. One was to make the brand more relevant universally so that Cinnabon was front of mind and people would consider us and think about the venues where we were to come and see us. The other traffic driving strategy was capture rate of the people who were already there. How can we visually compete with what had become an explosion of snack competition in the venues, which still exists today? So the first strategy was leverage our strategic partnerships and alliances to tell the story of Cinnabon so we were relevant universally. The second strategy to improve capture rate was broaden the perception of variety without moving too far away from the core. We had a little bit of a relevance problem in some of our venues. People loved us, but then they would say, but I just can't, because they thought it was too big or too high of calories. And what we really had to do was market what we already had, smaller cinnamon rolls, other baked goods, and re-energize the blended beverage platform so that people would not only see there was variety, but that there was portable variety, so they could snack on the go, which is critical in the venues where we do business.
Food companies today seem to be really pushing, the health food trends. Cinnabon really seems to embrace the fact that their product is an indulgence. Why have you guys made that decision, and what's the reaction you're getting from consumers?
I think there's a few ways we approach it. One is if you believe that people will continue to seek to treat themselves, which I think we can all agree that they will, then you agree there's a market for indulgences. But I think what today's consumer is looking for is not less indulgence. They're looking for higher quality. They're looking for transparency in what's in their food. They're looking for authenticity of ingredients. So for us, since we have the quality, it's made from scratch, it's rolled right in front of you in our bakeries, we realized that it was okay to stand in that space, that market position of quality indulgence. And the way you do that as an indulgent brand is make sure if someone's going to give you the gift of their discretionary calories, and of course their discretionary income, you had better make it so worth it or they will not come back. Literally in speeches that we give, when I say Cinnabon cinnamon rolls are not healthy, they applaud. They literally applaud and come up and say, it's so refreshing to hear someone say that. I say, they're not good for your butt, but they're good for your soul. And so treat yourself once in a while.
So your strategy has been to offer variety rather than to go the low-fat, low-cal route on your product.
Yeah, absolutely. Our strategy has been to offer variety and protect the quality. I think if we were too extreme, if we said, nope, we are one giant cinnamon roll, 880 calories, if you don't like it, don't buy it, the reality would be over many years, fewer and fewer people would buy it. And so not only is it the right thing to do for communities, it's the smart business move to provide enough variety while still staying true to who we are, which is what differentiates us, that allows us to enjoy growing success in both the franchise business and in other branded categories.
Birchbox's products are customized based on the users and subscribers' preferences.
Sorry about that little added audio there at the end. So I hope that through this Cinnabon video, you've been able to see how Cinnabon hasn't just done what they want. They've made strategic marketing decisions to respond to the customer and to the economic environment and their competitive environment. So I think you're hoping to begin to see how the marketing environment definitely affects what marketers do. So let's talk about these economic forces just a little bit more. And I just first of all want to define what we mean by an economic cycle. Um, Generally, an economic cycle is a pattern of fluctuations as measured by gross national product. And we'll talk about GNP or GDP in a second in national economies. And so economies in which the market decides what is bought and sold typically go through cycles where they reach a peak, the economy is at its high, and then something happens and the economy kind of contracts or recesses. And when it hits its lowest point, we call that a trough. At some point, the economy begins to recover. We call that recovery. And in recovery, then we actually expand again into a peak. So this is this concept of economic or business cycles. And so you might hear words like prosperity to refer to a peak, or a recession where there is not economic growth. In fact, instead there's economic decline. Or even sometimes a very severe recession. You might hear the word depression. So those are examples of the economy and the different economic cycles in which businesses have to operate. I want to direct you here to a couple of links that can provide additional information. First, we're going to go to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this tells you a little bit about the U.S. economy at a glance. You can look here at the unemployment rate and whether more or fewer people are unemployed. And there's even debate about whether unemployment is the best thing to measure, but we'll let it suffice to say that the more people that are employed, the more income they would have, and therefore the more buying power they would have, which would be better for products and services marketed at that time. Just wanted to take you on a brief field trip to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Another website that we're going to go to here looks at different economies, and I think this one is really interesting because it measures GDP, which is gross domestic product. It's the total value of all things produced by an economy less some items, but basically it's how much an economy is producing. And it's interesting to note that in 2002, the United States still had the world's largest economy. This lists the European Union as first, but the European Union is made up of many different countries. So if you separated out Germany, France, the United Kingdom, etc., from the European Union, collectively those companies surpass the U.S. GDP. But if you look at those countries separately, they do not. So the U.S. still has a very large GDP, but we hear a lot about China, and even though China is behind the United States, why do we hear so much about the Chinese economy? And that's because if you look at the history of the Chinese economy, you can see how they have experienced rapid growth in recent history, while the U.S. economy is growing much more slowly. So if the Chinese economy continues to grow at the pace at which it is, it will surpass the U.S. GDP or the U.S. economy at some point if we continue at the pace of economic growth that we are. So the point of these slides is to just show you a little bit about how the economy goes through cycles and how that can affect the buying power of consumers and their ability to purchase products and services. Let's talk about this concept of consumer buying power a little bit. First of all, a consumer who goes out and has a job and makes money, the amount that they make is called their gross income. And of course, they have to pay income taxes in the U.S. economy. So what is left over after paying taxes that is used for necessities, things like housing, basic food, clothing, is called disposable income. Things that we truly need are bought with disposable income. After we buy our necessities, our true needs, what is left over is then what's called discretionary income. So theoretically, discretionary income would be used to buy things that we want, but not necessarily things that we need. Now, it's interesting that in today's economy, marketers have done an excellent job of convincing you that many of the things that you simply want, you really need, like a cell phone, for example. Do you really need a cell phone or a smartphone, or is it just something that you need? But disposable income is typically used to buy what we would call basic needs to sustain your life: shelter, food, basic clothing. And discretionary income then is what is left over that is used to buy your wants. So my question to you now is, which are affected more by changes in the economy? Products that are purchased with disposable income, or products that are purchased with discretionary income? And I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. We know that in A, products that are purchased with disposable income are things that supposedly we what? Need, while B, products that are purchased with discretionary income are supposedly products that we what? Want. So if the economy changes a lot, either positively or negatively, that means that we can no longer buy things that we simply want, but we have to use that more limited buying power to buy things that we need. So the answer to the question would be that B, items purchased with discretionary income are more affected by these recessions and changes in the economic cycle. Having talked a little bit about economic influences in the marketing environment, let's move on and talk briefly about technological influences in the marketing environment. This first website that I'm going to talks to you, it's from Advertising Age, about how U.S. adults are now spending more time on digital devices, new technology, than on watching television. And some might classify this as a social environmental change as well. But definitely this new technology, particularly all the, you can see here through my pointer, oh, I may have lost the article I wanted to refer to. Hold on just a second. That the surge in all this digital has been driven by mobile technology. So the point is, you can see how new technology affects what people are buying. The purchase of things like smartphones, tablets, and feature phones is definitely growing, while perhaps the purchase of more traditional televisions might decline because of this new technology. let's look at how new technology has affected the concept of a drive-in movie. I don't know if you've been to a drive-in movie or not, but in 2013, drive-in theaters were forced to convert to digital production because that's the way movies were produced. So, because they were forced to digital production, that was very, very expensive for many movie operators. So in this case, Honda, something that doesn't really have anything to do with drive-in movies, other than the fact that people use their cars and vehicles to go to drive-in movies, ran a contest to see which drive-in theaters in the United States people wanted saved, and they gave the money to update some of those mom and pop operations to digital drive-in theaters. Again, in this case, Honda was responding to changes in the technological environment. I want you to think as technology beyond just things that do with electronics or the internet. Even things like the footwear industry are affected by technology. This particular article talks about different alternatives to leather as being ways that they could change the technology of footwear. And interestingly enough, I think you've seen different brands advertised where it emphasizes how a particular brand might help you to jump higher or be able to move side to side, or a more breathable fabric, etc. So in addition to competitive, economic, and technological forces happening in the market environment, we have to also understand that laws and regulations have great influence on what marketers market and how they go about doing that. First of all, one form of regulation would simply be self-regulation. If you can do a good job and respond to your customers in ethical and customer-oriented ways, perhaps there won't be a need for the government to regulate your industry. So that's one way, is to just self-regulate within a particular industry. Many trade associations have standards for their members. And additionally, there are many federal and state regulations that you will study in a business law class. Two that have the greatest, or there's three areas that have the greatest impact on marketing, and one of those organizations is the Federal Trade Commission. We talked about marketing being that concept of exchange or trade, and so the Federal Trade Commission is the main body that regulates marketing activities. And you can see that there are all kinds of regulatory things in terms of what marketers can or cannot do in terms of legal requirements. And one of the things that the Federal Trade Commission tries to do is to protect competition. Competition between organizations or businesses or marketers is generally good for customers. So the Federal Trade Commission has a lot of laws and regulations that deal with protecting competition. Another big aspect of regulation in marketing is handled by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And so if you come up with a brand or a trademark for your particular brand, you have to protect your legal right to use that trademark or that brand name or even that patent. So here you could go to find all kinds of information about patents and trademarks, and we're going to be discussing branding much later in this particular class. But you can use this particular website to search for a variety of things that you might wonder about patent and trademark. One thing I'm going to search for is how long does a trademark last? And it brings me to an answer, and if you come down here how long does a trademark registration last, which I think is kind of interesting. It's valid as long as you timely file all registration maintenance documents. So if you get a trademark, it's not good forever. You must file a declaration of use between the fifth and sixth year following its registration, and you must file a renewal between the ninth and 10th years and every 10 years thereafter. And so there are a lot of questions that you could get answered here about registering your brand, having a registered trademark for your particular brand, so to protect it so that other competitors couldn't use that same brand. For example, later this semester, you're going to be marketing a backpack, and you can't call it North Face because there's someone that always already has the legal exclusive rights to use that particular brand name. Lastly, let's talk about things in the natural environment that might affect marketing. There's a big push now to do things that appear to be good for the marketing, or excuse me, for the natural environment. And in fact, products and services that are marketed as being green, in other words, good for the natural environment, oftentimes have an advantage in the marketplace. I've just gone to the U.S. Small Business Administration where there's a discussion of green marketing and how to go about marketing your products in a green way, or a what might be called sustainable way. When we use the word sustainable, we mean that you are not using resources from our natural environment in your business or economic cycle faster than they can be replaced, so that the natural environment will be sustained. If we're using resources from the natural environment faster than they can be replaced, you are not using those resources in a sustainable way. And so many times people will practice green marketing in a positive way, an ethical way, where they show how what they are doing is good for the natural environment. But sometimes people practice green marketing and make it appear that they are doing things that are good for the natural environment, when in actuality they aren't really. And we call this concept greenwashing. And I want to just take you to an example here. I'm going to take time to work through this particular example. Apparently, and I didn't know that much, there's a lot of emphasis on eating fish that are caught in a sustainable way. So, in other words, when we are catching fish or seafood, that we are not catching it in such great amounts that it cannot be replaced in our ecosystem. And so it talks about a major food chain called Foods, where they are marketing a product as being sea bass, as being certified sustainable. And we're not saying that Whole Foods are doing this, but it introduces this concept of greenwashing, which is a strategy that makes consumers think they are protecting the planet when actually they aren't. So the product is marketed as green when actually it's not obtained sustainably. And so I would just encourage you to maybe review this article in greater detail, so that you can look at, most majority of Americans trust and would buy food that is caught in a sustainable fashion. But the question is it really, or are they greenwashing? So I hope this has provided somewhat of an overview of the importance of economic, technological, legal and regulatory, and natural environment influences in the marketing environment, as well as competitive influences that we discussed in a previous lesson.